This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, going Rabbi Sai. So we're learning this week's Parsha, Matos. Let me introduce you to the 5 books of Moses over here, if you want one of them. Parshas Matos. I want to focus on a Rashi, which gives us a fundamental understanding of the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Parsha begins by speaking about the laws of vows, of Nadarim, but it begins with a very unusual expression. Vayidaber Moshe al Roshei HaMatos. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of Bnei Yisrael Leimar, to the Bnei Yisrael, and he says, Zeh hadavar, this is the matter, Asher Tziva Hashem. Zeh hadavar Asher Tziva Hashem. This is a introduction to a prophecy. Zeh hadavar, this is the matter. Now, prophecy always begins with some type of introduction. So, for instance, in yesterday's Haftarah, you had Koyamar Hashem, Zacharti Lach Chesed No'orayach. So you could either have Zeh hadavar or Koy. You could have Zeh or Koy. And Rashi brings down the words of Chazal. Rashi says, Zeh hadavar, Moshe nisnave v'Koyamar Hashem. Moshe prophesied Koyamar Hashem. When did Moshe prophesy Koyamar Hashem? Kachatzois halayla. Right? By Makas B'charis, Moshe's nevuah began with the word Koy. V'hanaviyim nisnavu b'Koyamar Hashem. The other Nevi'im also prophesied Koyamar Hashem, like we had yesterday. Koyamar Hashem, Zacharti Lach Chesed No'orayach. Moshe v'aleya Moshe, Moshe's nevuah was on a higher level. Shenisnave b'lashain zeh hadavar. Moshe not only prophesied with the word Koy, but he also prophesied with the word zeh. Now the Rambam in his in his commentary, in his explanation of the Yud Gimel Ikrim, he speaks out that there are 4 differences between the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu and other Nevi'im, something we discussed pretty recently. Moshe Rabbeinu had prophecy at will. Moshe Rabbeinu did not lose his faculties at the time that he gained prophecy. Various differences between the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu and Shar Nevi'im. Here Rashi is pointing out another difference, and that is that all the other Nevi'im prophesied with the word Koy. Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied with the word Koy, and he prophesied with the word Zeh. So the question is, what is the meaning of this? What is the significance of the fact that Moshe prophesied with the word Koy and the word Zeh, and other Nevi'im only prophesied with the word Koy? So the way the Mizrahi learns, Rabbi Mizrahi, sometimes referred to as the Re'im, he says like this: B'sifri milas Koy. In the Sifri, the word Koy, Moira al mechuvan ha'inyan. The word Koy means the intent of the matter. Umila zeh moira al ha'inyan haramos be'enai. The word zeh refers to the inyan itself. Meaning like this. The word Koy means, this is the upshot of it. This is what he's saying, basically. And zeh is, this is exactly what it means. Zeh is much more specific. Koy is much more general. What's the meaning of this? It says Mizrahi, when other prophets prophesied, it was with what's called a asbaklar yeshein meira, an unclear prism. They didn't see the matter precisely, they just basically got the upshot of the matter. In other words, it's like, you wake up and your glasses are fogged, and you don't see exactly what's going on, but you know who it is. You know who's in front of you. You don't exactly, maybe you can't tell what color shirt they're wearing, or you can't tell exactly all the particulars of their features, but you know who it is. So the other Nevi'im only had the ability to get the mechuvan min ha'inyan. Sheheru lahem, that was shown to them. That's why by other Nevi'im it says Kai. Why? Shepirushai ha'mechuvan min dvarav lo yadvarim be'inam. In other words, Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel were not able to say this is exactly what Hashem said. Very good question. But Moshe Rabbeinu had an absolutely clear prism. In other words, it sounds like the reason why the other prophets were not able to say precisely is they did not have the capacity to see exactly what Hashem said. Moshe Rabbeinu did have that ability, but Moshe had the ability to kafi mashu hisker hu b'shonei zeh hadavar. That's why by Moshe it says zeh shepirushay zeh hadavar be'enoi mi bilti shum shinaka. This is exactly what Hashem said. So fragt Zemi. So then, why does Rashi point out that Moshe also prophesied with Kai? Did Moshe have Aspaklari Ha'Me'ira? Did not have Aspaklari Ha'Me'ira? If Moshe Rabbeinu had a much greater capacity, then why would he sometimes prophesy with the word Kai? So the Mizrahi himself asked this question. Zami umimnei Moshe Rabbeinu betchilas nevu asay adayin loy Allah ela madrega shezacha b'achroina. The answer is Moshe in the beginning was he was a novice. He was a beginner. Everybody starts out as a beginner. At the beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu was like any other Navi. He was like Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel. So in the beginning, in his first prophecies by Makas B'chayros, he was still on, prophecy 101. So therefore it says, Koyamar Hashem, Kachatzois Halayla. But later on, he graduated. He graduated to the Zeh level. Okay?
So it means that he didn't see it, or he was not comfortable to...
It sounds like at the beginning of Moshe Rabbeinu's career, he was only on a level where he cannot fully comprehend precisely exactly what Hashem was saying. He was basically here's the message. Basically, you guys are dead at midnight. Exactly how Hashem said it, maybe he didn't know, like Yeshaya Yirmiyah Yechezkel, but the basic message he got, basically, either do tshuva or you're dead. That he understood. But, says Mizrahi, Umi shezacha b'asbaklaria hameira. Once Moshe Rabbeinu graduated, shuv loy hisker b'shane rak zeh hadavar. From there on, once he got to zeh, he's only zeh. He never goes down. He's never downgraded. V'zehu she'amru Moshe nisnave b'koi amar roitzoloymar b'tchilas nevuasai v'chol anavim b'koi amar tamid. Moshe had the extra feature that once he got zeh, he was, he stayed with zeh. That's how the Mizrahi begins. That's how the Mizrahi understands Rashi. The Maharal disagrees with this. This is supposed to be like a Maharal Shiur. Okay, we'll make it a Maharal Shiur. So the Maharal quotes to the Mizrahi that, by the way, let me just tell you, I'm going to tell you one of my all-time favorite Vertlach on, this is more going with the opinion of the Mizrahi, very geschmack, by Oz Yashir. What does it mean, Oz Yashir? Then they sang. No kidding, then they sang. Whenever you do something, it's then. You can't do something not then. Then there was a shear, then he ate a bagel, then he was listening, right? Well, everything is then. Whatever you do. So Rashi says something very interesting. Oz Allah beliboy loymar shira. It entered their mind to sing shira. Az Allah beliboy loymar shira. That's what Az Yashir means. It entered their mind to sing shira. And the question is, no kidding, it entered their mind. Obviously, if they did it, it entered their mind first. You can't do anything without it first entering your mind. What's the kavanah of Rashi? It entered the mind of Klal Yisrael. Az Allah belibam loymar shira. So the kasha, the Gemara says, it's a Gemara in Ksubis, that afilu ubar b'mei imam amro shira, that even little babies in their mother's womb, they sang as Yashir. So the Shem Yishmael asks, how do they sing shira? So he says a nes. Shkoich is a nes. It was nevuah, right? Az Yashir was nevuah. In order to say nevuah, you need kli hadibur. You need the faculty of speech. If you don't have the faculty of speech, you could be very smart. You can't speak nevuah. For example, the Gemara says Amais, the Navi Amais, had a lisp, and he could not pronounce the letter S. Yeah, so he was like a litvak. He couldn't say S. So instead of saying boileis, he said boileish. So what do you mean? But he's a Navi. Answer is very good as a Navi, but you also have to have a mouth. If you don't speak well, you can't enunciate the nevuah. So how could a kid b'mei imam say shiur, right? The Gemara says that a kid b'mei imai, piv sasam, his mouth is closed. If his mouth is closed, how could he sing shira? Also, mamish apela, Gemara says, ein shnei neviim misnaveim b'signoin echad. Two neviim will never prophesy in the same way. If Hashem tells the same thing, one to Yeshaya, one to Yirmiyah, Yirmiyah will say it one way, Yeshaya will say it another way. Yirmiyah will filter through the prism of his personality, and Yeshaya will filter through the prism of his personality. So how could every single Jew say the exact same shira as Yashir? Every Jew said the same words, like it just spontaneously, everyone came up with the same shira? How's that possible? If ein neviim misnavim b'signon echad, then certainly 600,000 neviim will not be misnavim b'signon echad. So the Shem Yishmael says like this, based on this Rashi, he says that there are different types of prophecy. There's a Koi prophecy, which all the other Nevi'im prophesied. Koi means Aspaklaria She'ena Me'ira, which is basically, you don't know exactly, but the upshot of the matter. Koi Amar Hashem Achatzois Alayla. But then there's a Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, Aspaklaria HaMe'ira Zeh. This is exactly what Hashem said. In fact, Chazal say about Moshe Rabbeinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Medaberes Mitoich Groinoi Shel Moshe. Hashem was speaking out of Moshe's voice box. That's how Moshe was able to prophesy. Zeh hadavar. He wasn't even speaking. It was God speaking out of his voice box. So the Shem Shmuel says that by Oz Yashir, the Nevuah was begeder, what? Aspaklaria HaMe'ira. Because V'haraya, Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't talk at all. He didn't speak clearly. Moshe Rabbeinu was a kvad peh, kvad lashon. So how was he able to give shiur? The answer is because it wasn't him. Hashem was speaking out of his mouth. Hashem was medaberes mitach groiner shel Moshe. So the nevuah of Az Yashir was a nevuah of Zeh. How do we know? They said Zeh keli ve'anvehu. They employed this expression of Zeh hadavar. So this was nevuah begeder Hakadosh Baruch Hu medaberes mitach groinam. God was speaking out of their throat. And the same way Hashem could speak out of the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he didn't speak clearly, Hashem spoke out of the voice box of these embryos in their mother's womb, even though they weren't able to speak yet. So now the big question is, the $1 million question is, they didn't do anything then. God spoke out of their throats, so why are they getting credit for Az Yashir? They didn't do anything. That's why Rashi says, you know what they get credit for? They decided to sing. Allah belibam loymar shir. They decided to sing. They're not getting credit for what they did. They didn't do anything. It was Hashem speaking out of their voice box, but the credit was for us. Allah belibam loymar shir. Okay.
So Moshe was about that. How could be Kayamah? How can he was always speculation of no?
Oh, so the Mizrahi is saying that at the beginning of his career,
even though he was in Kvalos and he could still be like that.
You mean how you get the words out clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, I hear it. Maybe he still had Hakosh. I hear.
But
I don't know.
You come
I hear.
by
Good question.
Push, right? I even don't speak clearly something.
Yeah. Okay, so let me tell you, that's the way the Mizrahi learns. That in the beginning Moshe was a Kai, just like the other Nevi'im, and ultimately he graduated to Zeh. So the Maharal quotes the Gur Aryeh, and he says, Ve'enoi maspik. Doesn't cut it. He says, because in that case Moshe should never prophesy in Kai, which is a much lower level. Why would he sometimes prophesy in Kai? He doesn't address exactly why he doesn't like the Mizrahi, that in the beginning Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't on that Madrega, but he just dismisses it. So he says like this. He says it's not a matter of levels of Nevuah. You know, the Maharal Kedarkoi breaks everything down philosophically, and he says that there are two types of prophecy. There's prophecy about something that happened or something that will happen, and then there's Torah. All the other Nevi'im, Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel, their job was not to teach Torah. They weren't giving Torah. Torah was given. Moshe Rabbeinu was the only person who brought Torah down in Hashemayim. Once Moshe Rabbeinu brought down Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu brought down Torah, Yeshaya did not, Yirmiyah did not, Yecheskel did not. When Yeshaya speaks Nevuah, he's saying this happened or this will happen. God did this miracle or he will do a certain miracle. Things that happen are circumstantial. They happen, they didn't have to happen. They're not absolute, they're not laws of the universe. Hashem decided to make it happen, and it happened, and if he would have decided not to make it happen, they're not absolute, they're circumstantial. Torah is absolute. Torah is something that inherently exists. God did not decide to give us a Torah. Torah are the laws of the universe. Torah preceded the world. Torah just is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked in the Torah, right? Estakel b'rais ubar alma. That means Torah is an absolute constant. Happenings and nisim and events are circumstantial. The word kai means, it's not a lack of clarity, but it's a description used when you talk about something that happened to happen. The word zeh is when you talk about absolute constants, things that just exist because they do. Gravity is not a circumstance. Gravity is a law of the universe. Torah is not a happening, is not circumstantial. Torah is. So therefore, like this, all the other Nevi'im, they didn't teach Torah. They said, behave, otherwise this is going to happen, or this nation will be destroyed. That is all circumstantial. Now Moshe Rabbeinu in general, his job was to teach Torah. Torah is a constant. Torah is a law of the universe, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu has to use the correct terminology. And that's zeh. This just means, it doesn't mean more clear or less clear. It means it's a fundamentally different way to describe something. So you'll ask, so why did Moshe Rabbeinu, when he spoke about Makas B'chayros, say the word Kai? The answer is because at that particular instance he wasn't teaching Torah. He was speaking about an event that will happen. So it's not that Moshe Rabbeinu began his career on a lower level and then graduated to a higher level. It all depends on what Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to do. Usually his main function, his main occupation was teaching Torah, and therefore whenever he teaches Torah he uses the expression zeh. Zeh is more appropriate for Torah. Whenever Moshe Rabbeinu is doing the type of thing that other Nevi'im would do, he would use the expression Kaya Marashem Bechatzos Halayla, says Maharal. Now I'll just read to you a few of the words. He says, V'nira, ki inyan zeh hu toila b'nevuas Moshe Rabbeinu l'Hashem u'madrei gasai. The word zeh is connected to the particular level of Moshe. Ki hanevuos heim shtayim. There are two types of prophecy. Ha'achas hu shenisnavu ba kol hanavim. One is the way all the prophets prophesied, Amasa Hashem, on the actions of God, V'han Hagasa Ba'olam, and his running of the world, L'chol Asher Nasa Ba'olam, whatever occurs in the world. V'amadrega Shel Moshe Haya Koilel Zeh, it included this, V'koilel Gamkein L'hisnava Ois Ala Mitzvahs. When Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied on mitzvahs, V'ha-Torah, Shetziva Lai Hashem Yisbarach Mipiv, that God commanded from his mouth. This level is not comparable to the first. The first level, things are happening, and are occurring in the world. In other words, Torah, a mitzvah is eternal, tzitzis. Tzitzis preceded the world. Tzitzis exists now. Tzitzis will always exist. Whether there are people to fulfill it, the concept of tzitzis is something which is inscribed in the fabric of reality. It just is. It's divine. Torah is divine reality. Everything else is just a decision that was made for something to happen. Torah is not a decision. Torah is reality. I'll just give you one more place where the Maharal brings out this Yisayid. In Parshas Boy, the pasuk says, "Ushmartem es ha matzos al tikri matzos ela mitzvos mitzvah haba liyadcha al tachmitzana." So, if I were to ask you a question, what's the reason why if a mitzvah comes up, don't let it grow stale, right? In other words, capitalize mitzvah haba liyadcha al tachmitzana. You're deciding, should I daven 8:30, should I daven 9 o'clock? Just get up already, because you never know. Why? Because if you push it up to 9 o'clock, it may never end up happening. Should I learn now or should I learn later? Just do it. Why? Because if you push it off, who knows, so many things can happen. You might forget. Your wife might say you have to do this. Right? Like Chazal say, Harbe kategara mekan v'yad gichain. A lot of things could happen, right? Most people would say the inyan of Zrizos, the purpose of Zrizos, the reason why Zrizos is important is, if you don't capitalize immediately, you never know what could happen. You may lose out the mitzvah entirely. The Maharal says, certainly what we just said is true, a different understanding of why Zrizos is so important. It says like this: time is a creation, which means that God exists outside of time. Right? Bereshis bara Elokim. Many Mefarshim learn Bereshis means time. Hashem created time. That means Hashem exists outside of time. Time is not something that affects the divine. That's why everything Hashem does is haraf ayin. He's not governed. He's not limited by the physicality of time. A mitzvah is not eating. Eating is a physical activity. Eating takes time. You sit down, you eat. A mitzvah is a divine reality. It's a divine constant. If you're going to do a mitzvah in a sort of a slow way, in a way which is apparent, that's being affected by time, you're not being true to what you're doing. Time is a divine reality. Just like God is unaffected by time, everything Hashem does is keharef ayin. Even though we're human and when we do the mitzvah, it's going to take us time, but as much as possible, you do it without allowing time to elapse to show that you recognize that you're involved in a divine reality, and the godliness is not controlled, is not governed, is not under the domain of time. That's the concept of mitzvah abal yadcha al tach mitzvah. You have to realize what you're doing, what you're involved in. You're involved in not a physical activity. You're involved in something which is above and beyond the governings of time. Okay, so that's the concept of the Maharal. So again, the machlokes Mizrahi and the Maharal. The Mizrahi just says Koi is the lower level. Moshe Rabbeinu was Misnavi B'Koi in the beginning, and other Navi, and then ultimately Moshe Rabbeinu graduated. The Maharal says no. The Maharal says that it's not a lower and a higher. It's just when you prophecy about circumstantial happenings, so that is not as absolute. You could use the terminology Koi when you Misnavi about Torah. Torah is a reality. You have to say this is how it is.
So how are so many mitzvahs governed by time though?
Zman Grama?
No, we spoke about the two, so like the Kriya Shema, right? The Zman. If you say it during the Zman, it's a mitzvah, and if you miss that, it's not. So time is an element of a lot of mitzvahs.
Right. They have to be performed at certain occasions, but it sounds like once you've reached that occasion, then it should not be done in a... look, there are different dimensions of it. Time is a sort of a function of the physical world. Look, you need a body to put on tzitzis also, right? Malachim, they can't put on tzitzis. They can't put on tefillin. So, look, all the mitzvahs are somewhat are limited to physical circumstance. But as much as possible to realize that you're involved in something which is, even though we are physical beings and we're performing them in a physical way, to realize that you're dealing with, something that's l'mala min hazman. You're dealing with the davar aleki. Okay, I want to tell you a gavaldik Rashi. There's no Maharal in it, just a good Rashi, nice Rashi. At the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to take revenge against Midian, and Hashem told him, then you're going to die. And Rashi says, even though Moshe Rabbeinu heard that this would be the end of his life, he did it b'simcha. So then the pasuk says like this: Vayimasru me'alfei b'nei Yisrael. This is Perek Lamed Aleph pasuk Hey. Gevaldig Rashi, an unbelievable Rashi, tremendous Rashi. Ready? Just look at these words. Vayimasru. Vayimasru implies that they had a hard time finding officers to be able to attack Midian. Almost Vayimasru means they had to take them against their will. So Rashi says, shivchan shel royei Yisrael. Look at the great praise of the Jewish leaders. Kama hem chavivim al Yisrael. How beloved they are to Klal Yisrael. Okay, so now we're about to hear how beloved Moshe Rabbeinu was to Klal Yisrael. We're in Perek Lamed Aleph, pasuk Hey Rashi. Ad shaloi shamu b'misasai. Before they heard that Moshe Rabbeinu was going to die, Mahu Aimer, what does it say? Oid ma'ad uskaluni. Moshe Rabbeinu said, if I give them another drasha, they're going to stone me. That's why they give Rabbanim off Shabbat. Moshe Rabbeinu said, if I give one more drasha, the people are going to stone me. But but once the people heard that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to die when he takes revenge against Midian, they didn't want to fight that war until they had to be delivered against their will. Look how much Klal Yisrael loves Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because when they heard that Moshe Rabbeinu, this was his last battle, the last stand, Custer's last stand, they didn't want to go because they loved him so much. Look how much Klal Yisrael loves Moshe. When they realized that this is Moshe Rabbeinu's last stand, they didn't want to go. Tremendous love they have for Moshe Rabbeinu. Just like one simple question here. Rashi The purpose of this Rashi is L'hidiyacha chibasan shel royei Yisrael. Look how much the Klal Yisrael loves their leaders. There's one line here that seems a little bit out of place. If this is the Maimer Chazal to teach us how much Klal Yisrael loves its leaders, then why in the world would Rashi bring in that they wanted to stone Moshe Rabbeinu to death? Isn't that like not the right place to be saying this? We're trying to say L'hidiyacha chibasan shel royei Yisrael. So you want to tell me that they wanted to stone Moshe Rabbeinu to death somewhere else? Fine, but this is the place where Rashi chooses to tell me that they hated Moshe Rabbeinu so much they wanted to kill him. In the Rashi that says L'hidiyacha chibasan shel royei Yisrael.
Not him, his Russians.
It's nothing personal, Rabbi. We like you, we just don't like what you say.
Right.
That's a Mamash Pella, this Rashi. L'hidiyacha. So I once heard from Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Kiva Grumlach Shlita. You ready for this? The fact that they loved Moshe Rabbeinu, you don't see anything about the fact that Jewish people love their leaders. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu was a nice guy. Who said he was a leader? Yeah, you see that they loved him. But who said that he was a leader? So first Rashi has to prove that Moshe is a leader. What's the proof? They wanted to kill him. Now we know he's a leader. Now we know he's a Jewish leader. If everybody likes him, he's not a leader. So first Rashi says he has to establish, how do we know he's a roya? How do we know he's a shepherd? And it's because they want to stone him to death. Now let's establish that they loved him. At the end of his life, when they realized he was going to have to go, they said, Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't want to let you go. So once heard from Rav Shach, he didn't tell me personally, I heard B'Shem Rav Shach. There's a Gavaldig Gavart. When Aaron HaKohen dies, what does it say? Vayivku Oisai, Kol Beis Yisrael. Everybody cried for him. And by Moshe Rabbeinu it says, Vayivku Oisai, B'nei Yisrael. Jews were upset.
Leader.
I don't understand one second. This is the Shvach of Moshe. Imagine, you get up at somebody's levaya. Yeah, there are people who are not so happy that he left. That's a shvach of Moshe Rabbeinu. Imagine they said, Moshe Rabbeinu, there were a lot of people that were upset. By Aaron, everyone was upset. That's the big shvach of Moshe Rabbeinu. That there were people who were upset. And by Aaron, everybody was upset.
By Aaron, everyone liked him because he was the Olev Shalom. He always made the best.
By Aaron, everyone loved him because Aaron was a nice guy. Moshe, there were people that liked him, yeah. There were people that liked him. That's the shvach of Moshe Rabbeinu.
When you're a leader, you need to make certain harsh decisions.
Says Rav Shach, what's a hesped? A hesped is a declaration. The person fulfilled their tafkid in this world. So by Aaron HaKohen, Aaron's tafkid was, he's a Kohen Gadol, he's Oyev Shalom Roidev Shalom. So what's his hesped? The hesped is, how do we know Aaron fulfilled his tafkid in this world? Everybody cried when he died. Moshe Rabbeinu's job was not to be Oyev Shalom Roidev Shalom. Moshe Rabbeinu, this is a long discussion, Moshe Rabbeinu was not Hillel. Aaron HaKohen was a Hillel. Hu yiyeh lecha lepeh. Rashi Teva was Hillel. Aaron was Hillel. Moshe Rabbeinu was Shammai. Lo ish devarim anoichi. So Seifei Teva is Shammai. He's the Av Bezdin. The Av Bezdin is not a popularity contest. It's Yikov Hadin Asahar. You just say it as it is. So how do we know Moshe Rabbeinu fulfilled his tafkid? The answer is most Jews were upset that he left. And some weren't. And that's exactly what his job was. What's a rabbi? I'm not sure. Guess a little bit of both. Anyway, I'll tell you an interesting thing. Rabbi Yosef says last week's Parsha, Parshas Pinchas, Moshe Rabbeinu daven Zivkod Hashem Lekesa Islucho, right? Moshe Rabbeinu was inspired that Hashem should appoint a leader. He knew he was going to go, and he wanted the next leader. So Rabbi Yosef asked, well, what's hold your horses? You have 14 more Parshas until you're going to pass away. What are you davening now in Parshas Pinchas? Wait till V'zois HaBracha. Well, you're already itching to go? So Ravadia says that Moshe Rabbeinu was getting very nervous. Because yes, he understood that the role of leader of Klal Yisrael is, sometimes you got to say it as it is, and even the people are going to stone you, but you have to draw the line. You can't be a kanoi. So Moshe Rabbeinu was getting nervous that in Parshas Pinchas just wiped out a Nasi Yisrael. And he sees Hashem's pleased with him. So Moshe Rabbeinu is getting nervous. Maybe Hashem's going to pick Pinchas to be the next leader of Klal Yisrael. He's a nice guy, Pinchas. Pinchas is a great guy. He's a big tzaddik. But he can't be the Manag Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu immediately davens, Hashem, you need to appoint somebody who could sort of slide with the people. So Moshe Rabbeinu had a difficult job. He understood on the one hand, he can't be a kanoi. On the other hand, his job was not to be oyev shalom, v'roidev shalom. That was Aaron HaKohen's job. Anyway, one last offering. Okay? The Rashi brings down in Hilchos Tumah in Parak Lamed Aleph Pasuk Yotes, the famous Maimer Chazal, like this: Atem kruyim Adam, ve'ein goyim kruyim Adam. Right? There's a machlekes. Even if you say kivrei goyim are not metame ba'oyel, like the pasuk says in Yecheskel, va'atein tzoini tzoin marisi Adam atem kruyim Adam ve'ein hagoyim kruyim Adam. But nevertheless, goyim are metame b'mago uv'masa. So just on this statement of Chazal, right? Atem kruyim Adam ve'ein oidei kachavim kruyim Adam. Jews are called Adam, goyim are not called Adam. Right? This is not one of the more politically correct statements of Chazal. Right, Aryalev? Atem kriyim Adam, you're called man. Okay, there are various explanations. You have the Baal Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, many different explanations. So Maharal says like this: what's the difference between an animal and an Adam? Choice, speech, but it all emanates from the soul, the spiritual quality of the entity. Balei Chayim are Choimrim. Balei Chayim, an animal is just substance, is just a physical piece, is just a physical entity. But an Adam has in him a nefesh or neshama. So the nefesh or the neshama is a sichli, is nivdal, is separate, is a higher entity. That, says Maharal, the meaning of the Gemara in Yevamos Daf Samach Aleph, Atem kruyim Adam ve'ino umayis kruyim Adam. That even though umayis ha'olam, they're human beings, certainly, but they have a different quality neshama. Now, people want to know, do Goyim have a neshama? Absolutely. It's a pasuk in Chumash, Vayibach bi'abav nishmas chayim. Nevertheless, their neshama is a different quality. In what way? Their neshama is very much intertwined with their body. The neshama is mutva b'chaymer, immersed in physicality. It's more on the physical side. And therefore, they're not called Adam. It's closer to Balei Chayim. Even though they have a spiritual component, it's closer to Balei Chayim. Now, what's the difference between the physical and the spiritual? Something physical. Physical? You could bend it, you could mold it, you could form it, it's easy to change. A spiritual thing, like we just learned earlier in the Maharal, is a reality, is an existing thing. It's not circumstantial. It is inherent matter. It's very hard to change the spiritual. Says Maharal, from the Genus of Klal Yisrael we learn their shvach. What does it say about Klal Yisrael? Am kishei oirefu. They're stubborn. They can't change. Why? It's because of their greatness. Because they're so spiritual, it's a very difficult thing to take a spiritual thing and move it and change it and mold it. It's more of a constant. So says the Maharal, from the Genus of Klal Yisrael, Am Kishei Oiref, that they're Oimed B'Maseyim, we learn from here they're a great shvach. Because a physical thing, you could change the physicality. That's why, if somebody is not an Adam, that the category of human which is not an Adam, they blow with the wind. Sometimes they think Azoi, they think this way, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. What does it depend on? Depends on where they get funds. But the deeper understanding is the closer one is to the physicality, the more receptible they are to change. Says the Maharal, that's why the Medrash says about the Goyim, why didn't Yaina want to go to Nineveh? Says go to Nineveh, the Goyim are going to do tshuva. But the Yidden don't do tshuva. So how do you understand that? So the Maharal says the Umayis HaOlam are very close to doing tshuva, but it's not a real tshuva. It's just they're easy to mold, they're easy to change, they're easy to influence. The world religions spread very quickly. Goyim are the Umayis HaOlam are kroivei tshuva. That's why when Yaina was sent, he said it's not a good idea. However, Klal Yisrael our Nikro Adam, our personalities are inclined to the spiritual, and therefore it's more difficult for us to change. However, the Alter of Sabaka said like this: it's very easy to engrave on sand. You want to write something on sand? It's a piece of cake. But it's also easy to erase. The waves come, they wash it away. So the Ummah Ha'olam, very easy to teach them, but they change easily, for the good and for the bad. Klal Yisrael, very hard to get a yid to change. But on the other hand, they're Am K'shei Orach. But once they're makabel the change, it's a permanent change, it's a real change, because the neshama, the nefesh, is something which is sichli, it's a constant, it's a divine reality, and once, a very beautiful understanding of Am K'shei Orach Ata, which is really the great shvach of Parsha. Rabbi, have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.